Hello everybody, and a very, very warm welcome to Silverstone here in Northamptonshire for the 5th round of the 2013 International GT Open. This, the second race of the weekend. 50 minutes of action ahead of us in what will be the 10th race of a hugely competitive season so far. Just under 6 kilometres of the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit await the full field of cars as we begin to move in to the second half of the season. This, the last encounter before the summer break. Well, a very, very warm welcome to a extremely hot Silverstone. Track temperature 34 degrees, it's tipping 30 degrees and basking the large crowd here in beautiful sunshine. My name is Ben Evans and I will be guiding you through the next 50 minutes of action. And it should be an absolutely fantastic race. Yesterday we had a very dramatic race which was eventually claimed by Nicky Pastorelli and Miguel Ramos despite the very best efforts of Luca Filippi to chase down Pastorelli in the last stage of the race. For today though, it's Filippi who starts in pole position in the Vallorba course Ferrari, which he shares with the championship leader Andrea Montermini. They claimed pole position yesterday over this car, the AF course Ferrari 458 of Matt Griffin, by just over a tenth of a second, no more than that. So very, very tight qualifying, and Griffin and Duncan Cameron will be confident of their chances coming to today's race. They look for their third victory of the season. Well, it's the third win of the season for Nicky Pastorelli and Miguel Ramos yesterday in this V8 Racing Corvette. And eventually Pastorelli's margin on the line was just over a couple of seconds, and he's only 0.2 of a second adrift of pole in yesterday's qualifying. They are in the Super GT cars, which is, for broadly speaking, the GT2 spec cars. The GTS class for the GT3 cars, headed up by the man in 4th position, Jerome Bleekemolen, in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche, which he shares with Emilio de Guida. Bleekemolen very, very happy with the class pole position. Second in the GTS class and 5th overall in qualifying, Peter Cox in the Rhinos Lippert Lamborghini. Cox, who's really making a name for himself as something of the go-to man for a quick Lamborghini. Didn't get to race yesterday because, unfortunately, Fabian Hambrecht was an early retirement. Well, Luis Razzia and Chris van der Drift yesterday finished second in the GTS class on the road. Unfortunately, they incurred a post-race 30-second penalty, which pitched them down the order. So Razzia will be looking to get on the podium again today. One of the stars of yesterday's race was Kessel Racing's Jan Magnussen, driver who had so much success here at Silverstone in his record-breaking 1994 British Formula 3 campaign en route to Formula 1. And then Renger van der Zande, another driver who knows this place very well from his British Formula 3 days in the Safe Path Mercedes, which unfortunately didn't make it to the checkered flag yesterday with mechanical issues. Alexander Tauknitzer Jr., another driver who got a very brief run yesterday because it was Alexander Tauknitzer Sr. who backed that car into the wall at Beckett's and therefore prompted a retirement. 10th on the grid is Bert Longwin and Dietrich Schitthoff. They finished 3rd yesterday. Nicola Di Marco in the Kessel Ferrari. Well, he was on course for a GTS podium. Unfortunately, a puncture pitched him and co-driver Lorenzo Bontempelli well down the order. Paul Rosell in the SMP's Russian Bears Ferrari well up the grid. Walter Lechner in the Lechner Racing Mercedes SLS, one of 3 Mercedes SLS's that we've got in the field. That car was in the wars a little bit yesterday with Mario Placetta. They'll be looking for a better run today. So to explain how the race works, if you're new to the International GT Open, today is a 50-minute race. There is a mandatory pit stop, which comes between 40 and 60% of race distance. So essentially between 20 minutes into the race and 30 minutes into the race. So these drivers that we see on the grid are the starting drivers. It will all change mid-race. So it is on the front row, Luca Filippi and Matt Griffin. Row 2, Nicky Pastorelli and GTS pole sitter Jerome Bleekemolen. Row 3, the very experienced Peter Cox and Luis Razzia, who came within a hair's breadth of being in Formula 1 this season. Row 4, an XF1 racer, Jan Magnussen, alongside the Dutchman Renger van der Zande, who scored a victory at Jerez last time out. Row 5, Alexander Tauknitzer Jr. and Bert Longin. Row 6, former FIA Formula 2 race winner Nicola Di Marco and ex-World Touring Car Championship racer Paul Rosell. Row 7, Walter Lechner and the very rapid Michele Rugolo in his AF course Ferrari. Row 8 of the grid, Matteo Berretti, yesterday's GTS class runner-up alongside Michael Lyons and Kirill Ladygin. Row 9, Stefano Constantini, and yesterday's GTS class winner Rafael Suzuki in the Biotech McLaren. The 10th row, a newcomer to the championship this weekend, James Swift, in his Balfe Racing Ferrari 458, alongside former champion Joel Comathius. Antonio Speroni, another newcomer to the championship this weekend in the Orlando Sport Porsche. He shares with Isaac Tumlu and Lawrence Tomlinson. A very warm welcome to the grid for Lawrence and the Ginetta G55. Penultimate row, Danny Vertman and Stephen Earle in their Corvettes and Ferraris. Then the back row of the grid, Max Volker in the second of the Seyfarth Mercedes, and then the Rinaldi Racing Porsche of the Russian driver Vadim Kogai. But that car, the bright green Porsche of Kogai, was leading the GTS class for much of yesterday's race in the hands of Marco Seefried, so expect to see that car charging up through the field as the race progresses. It is always a rolling start in the International GT Open. They're on their formation lap now behind the pace car. When the pace car peels in, we'll be going green for 50 minutes of racing. As I said earlier on, they've got that mandatory pit stop that comes at the midpoint of the race. The minimum pit stop time is 65 seconds here at Silverstone, but instead of success ballast, the way the performance is equalised and success handicaps are applied is that the drivers who finish on the podium in the preceding race have additional time and their pit stop, and that can accumulate through the season. So it means in the Super GT class, both Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi in their Valour course Ferrari have got an additional 45 seconds in the pits, as do Nicky Pastorelli and Miguel Ramos, whereas crucially Matt Griffin, who shares the front row with Montermini, does not. And also Diedrich Schutthoff and Bert Longen in their Corvette have an additional 10 seconds for them in the GTS class, which has been super competitive this year with its an extra 15 seconds for the Bitec McLaren of Rafael Suzuki. Giorgio Pantano, 10 seconds for Matteo Beretta and Michael Lyons, and then 5 seconds for Johnny Larson and Jan Magnussen, who were promoted to third in the GTS rostrum yesterday following that penalty that was applied to Luis Razzia and Chris van der Drift. The cars working their way around the very lengthy Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. It's the longest permanent race circuit in the UK, just under 6 kilometres, just over 3.5 miles, depending on which way you want to calculate it. And they come through now on this formation lap, the newest part of the Silverstone Grand Prix track. Much of the layout has remained unchanged since when the track came into inception in the very late 1940s, but the sequence of Village, the Loop and Aintree Corner was added for the British Grand Prix when the wing pits were built 3 or 4 years ago, and the field now forming up side by side along the Wellington Straight, making a magnificent sight. And this is what the International GT Open is all about: multi-mark GT racing, supercars going wheel to wheel on the track with some of the finest drivers that you can find. We are in for a real treat here at Silverstone in glorious sunshine. Some would say a typical British sunshine, but it has given us a fantastic race yesterday, and I'm sure an equally good race again today. So the pace car peels off. It is the 2 Ferraris on the front row, then the predominantly white car of Luca Filippi and the predominantly red car of Matt Griffin, who are pacing the field down to the start and finish line when the red lights flash green. We'll be going racing here at Silverstone as they rumble through Woodcote Corner. There's the gantry, there are the red lights. When are they going to flash green? It's going to be any second now. And away we go for the second time this weekend at Silverstone. It's Luca Filippi who leads into Copse Corner for the first time. It's side by side just behind then as there's contact between the AF Course Ferraris. It's Michele Rugolo who gets pushed out wide. It's Matt Griffin in second, Jerome Bleekemolen trying to move clear of Nicky Pastorelli for third, and he does just that as they arrive into the Beckett's complex for the first time. So it's Filippi who leads. Second place is the red Ferrari of Matt Griffin, then third place the Orlando Sport Porsche of Jerome Bleekemolen. In fourth place is the Corvette of Nicky Pastorelli, and in fifth the Lamborghini of Peter Cox, as they're all cleanly through out of Chapel Curve and down the long hanger straight for the first time. And this is going to see the opportunity for Pastorelli to move back ahead of Jerome Bleekemolen. He does just that, moves up into third position. The fight for fifth is very tight. Peter Cox being chased down by Luis Razzia, and Razzia in turn has got the Seyfarth Mercedes. Renger van der Zande looking to the outside line as they arrive into Vale. Cars side by side, but it is Razzia in the McLaren who just holds off van der Zande. They've got Jan Magnussen swarming all over their tail, and the rest of the pack really running through as one, as we catch a glimpse of the Ginetta G55 in the hands of Ginetta Cars chairman Lawrence Tomlinson. Looking to make a little bit of ground as well is Bert Longen in the Corvette, as Walter Lechner goes side by side into Abbey with one of the AF Course Ferraris. Pick out which of those it was momentarily. It's already the race leaders accelerating through the loop and onto the Wellington Straight for the first time of asking. The real battle that's emerging, though, is the one probably just for the lower places in the top 10, as it's now the turn of Renger van der Zande to come under a lot of pressure from Jan Magnussen. They all are now wide onto the AstroTurf. They're going to have to be very, very careful, though, because we've seen lots of penalties being applied this weekend for drivers exceeding the track limits. Meanwhile, the leading trio just trying to get a little bit of daylight between themselves. The rest of the pack, but Longin coming under pressure from Alexander Taukanitsa Jr., the Belarusian driver, who was incredibly frustrated not to really get a proper race yesterday, because although the damage sustained to the car instant from his father was enough for the car to be able to be driven back to the pits, it was unfortunately also sufficient for it to go no further in the race. So Taukanitsa Jr. would like a good run today through Kopp's Corner, though, and Jan Magnussen in the fight for 8th and 9th, coming under real pressure from the driver who finished 3rd overall in yesterday's race, Bert Longin. And they are trying to close in on Renger van der Zande. We have another look at the start into Kopp's Corner, and a little bit of elbow-to-elbow stuff, and it was one of the SMP Russian Bears Ferraris, Kirill Ladygin, who got between they, of course, Ferraris. It's Giorgio Pantano, former Jordan Formula 1 racer, watching on from the pit wall as Longin dives to the inside of Magnussen as they hit the brakes around the right-hander at Stowe Corner, and then squirting down the hill ever so slightly before they climb up the incline into the heavy braking zone for Vale, and that immediately feeds into Club Corner. And in the GTS class, as ever, all very, very tight in these early stages of the race. The two Ombra Racing Ferraris running in formation, with, at the moment, Stefano Constantini just clear of Joel Camathius. Meanwhile, former GP2 Championship runner-up Luca Filippi aiming to pull clear of Matt Griffin and Nicky Pastorelli. These three drivers, though, all at the very, very top of the game, as is Jerome Bleekemolen, Peter Cox and Luis Razzia. Such strength in depth of this championship, as Renger van der Zande, multiple race winner in the British Formula 3 Championship, pushed Daniel Ricciardo all the way to the championship back in 2009, comes under attack then from Jan Magnussen, former McLaren and Stewart Formula 1 racer. In turn, they've both got Bert Longin on their tail. And this is what Multimark GT racing is all about, because each of these cars, i.e. the Mercedes SLS, the Ferrari 458, the Chevrolet Corvette, have all got sections of the circuit where they perform perhaps slightly more strongly than their rivals. In the case of the Corvette, it's along the straights. It's not the work of a moment to pilot the Corvette through the corners, but along the straight, it really does unwind. It's got an excellent top speed, whereas the Ferrari 458 is nicely balanced. Nervous watching on in the pit lane, with good reasons. Magnussen swipes across the bows of Bert Longin, and Longin trying every which way to move clear of Magnussen, but of course, yeah, Magnussen has become very established, particularly in the USA, as one of the very, very quickest drivers of Corvettes in GT racing around. Therefore, he knows exactly where around the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit the Corvette of Longin is going to be strong, where also he thinks the Ferrari 458's got the slight advantage, but Longin looks to draw alongside on the brakes into Stowe Corner, and through he goes. Magnussen tries to dispute it around the outside, nothing doing there, so Longin gains the place, moves up into 8th position. Don't forget, Longin is running in the Super GT class, whereas Magnussen's in the GTS class, so although Magnussen loses an overall position in the race, he doesn't actually lose out in terms of the class battles. There, of course, squad watching on from the gantry. It's their man, Matt Griffin, who currently runs in 2nd position, as we continue to follow the fight going on for 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th, because now, almost immediately, Bert Longin has latched himself onto the tail of the Dutchman, Renger van der Zande, as they tip through Village and into the loop, and Longin thinks about the move to the inside the loop. We've also got one of the, of course, Ferraris. It is Matteo Beretta, who moves clear of Kirill Ladygin. That the fight for 13th and 14th position. They're being chased then by Walter Lechner and Michele Rugolo. Alvaro Barber, who will be taking over the number 60 Ombra Racing Ferrari from Stefano Constantini a little bit later on in the race. As the action from the garage, Bert Longin begins to set up the move on Renger van der Zande as they fight for 7th and 8th, and Longin's got the run through Woodcote here. He looks to duck out of the slipstream, draws alongside as they arrive into Kopp's Corner. Van der Zande looks to turn across his bows. That was very tight, and Van der Zande holds the position, remains in 7th place, but Bert Longin is clearly very keen to move himself up the order as best he can. He stands a good chance of getting on the overall rostrum today, because although he has got an additional 10 seconds in the pits, that is 35 seconds less than the sister Corvette in the hands of Nicky Pastorelli and also the Valour course Ferrari, Luca Filippi. But you can see already how much the leading group have pulled away from this battle, and that's why Longin's trying to pick his way through it as quickly as he can, and he goes to the move on Van der Zande into Stowe, exactly the same manoeuvre that he achieved with Jan Magnussen last time around. Runs out a little bit wide on the exit of Stowe. Van der Zande, though, clambers all over his tail. They hit the brakes, move down through the gears into Vale. Longin doesn't really make friends with the apex there, but at the same time he doesn't lose too much time as Van der Zande now gets sucked in to a battle with Jan Magnussen, and they are fighting for 4th and 5th in the GTS class standings. The other thing they need to be mindful of is the car just behind them is another Super GT car in the hands of Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. So that timing screen tells us that Luca Filippi has been given a black and white warning flag for not adhering to the track limits, as we've got a problem for Luis Razzia in the Bitec Racing McLaren. Was that Razzia going very slowly? Hard to see from the context. We'll see at the end of this lap whether or not Razzia merges through. It certainly looked as if there was a problem there for Luis Razzia. Kessel Racing, watch on. And their garage, and the foremost of the Kessel cars is that of Jan Magnussen. And yes, Razzia hasn't come through Sector 2, so Luis Razzia in the Bitec Racing McLaren encountering problems. Real shame for the Bitec team, because this is one of their home races alongside Monza. They're an Anglo-Italian squad, so that's going to shuffle everybody up in the GTS class standings. It makes now this fight between Renger van der Zande and Jan Magnussen the one for 3rd in the GTS class, because it's being led at the moment by Jerome Bleekemolen. 2nd place is Peter Cox, and then this, the fight for 3rd in class. It's the fight for 7th and 8th overall, because they will shuffle up a place after the problems for Luis Razzia. As we were alluding to earlier, Luca Filippi has been given that black and white warning flag for not adhering the track limits, and the communications from race control this morning were telling us that if that is shown once more to Filippi, they will be looking at picking up a drive-through penalty. The officials really unimpressed with so many of the cars running wide, so Filippi's now going to just have to be mindful of not picking up that drive-through penalty, staying within the track boundaries, as already we are up to 20% race distance. Just 40 minutes remaining. It means we're only 10 minutes away from the opening of the pit window, and that's why we're seeing such frantic action as these drivers are trying to pick their way up through the order as very best they can. Kirill Adagim, former World Touring Car Championship racer, with a Lada on the tail of Matteo Beretta. Beretta and Michael Lange yesterday having really their strongest showing of the season. So the GTS field all stretch out, currently trailed by Rafael Suzuki in the 2nd and sole remaining of the Bitec McLaren. So here is the race leader, Luca Filippi. His advantage over Matt Griffin is just 1.1 seconds, and given that Griffin has got no additional pit stop handicap, so they didn't finish on the rostrum yesterday, then this could be very, very good news indeed for Griffin and co-driver Duncan Cameron. They accelerate through Woodcote Corner and about to reel off then the 5th lap of the race. It's Andrea Montermini, Luca Filippi's co-driver and the championship leader, who watches on. Here is the GTS class leader, 4th place in the race overall, Jerome Bleekemolen. Vastly experienced Dutchman. There's very little he's not competed in. Now one is into the pit lane is Luis Razzia. Razzia, of course, who was so close to being in Formula 1 this year. He'd signed the deal with the Marussia team, but as so often the case, was let down by sponsors at the 11th hour. Instead has found himself propelled into the International GT Open, where he runs right ahead of the GTS field. So the leading trio still only separated by 2.7 seconds, with Filippi doing what he can to pull away from Matt Griffin, and both of them in turn looking to get a little bit of daylight over Nicky Pastorelli. But last time around it was Pastorelli who was closing in just a little bit on Griffin. This is a track that Matt Griffin knows very well from his exploits in the British GT Championship, but also prior to that racing Formula Renault and other single-seaters as well in the UK. Admittedly not on this configuration, but test days at Silverstone in February, something of a rite of passage really for all British racing drivers as they look to move up the ladder. He'll have done hundreds and not thousands of laps around various configurations of the Silverstone circuit. Let's take the opportunity to enjoy in slow motion. Andrea Monteur, Luca Filippi rather, bouncing across the curbs. Here is Peter Cox, the Dutch driver, again another driver who knows Silverstone pretty well, having raced here through the years in various touring car and GT categories. It was frustrating not to see him out yesterday at the wheel of the Lamborghini, which encountered issues just before the pit stops. He currently runs 5th in the race overall, 2nd in the GTS class. Longin trying to reel him in at the moment with limited degree of success as the Umbra Racing Ferraris go side by side, and it's Joel Comathius who's got the run on Stefano Constantini. They make contact into Abbey and they both fire themselves off the road, and it's Constantini into the gravel trap. Comathius will continue, and the race over for Stefano Constantini. And well, Joel Comathius was completely alongside Constantini then, who kept turning across him, and the Umbra team will be absolutely furious with that, because the last thing you want to see is your cars tangling with each other. Let's have another look at it. Comathius was alongside, they turned into Abbey, and Constantini just moved across him. Not really an awful lot that Comathius could do at that point. So Constantini into the gravel trap. It's a nice day for the beach. It's not this early in the race. And it remains to be seen whether or not Joel Comathius makes it back to the start and finish line, whether he has to duck into the pits, because he appeared to have possibly sustained some damage to the left-hand side of the car then as a result of that contact. Either way, you can probably assume that the Umbra Racing Garage is not a particularly happy place at the moment. The leading trio about to arrive at the scene of the crime, because they turn into Abbey now on their 7th lap of the race. Still just 3 or so seconds separating them, and there is Comathius, and yes, he has got damage to the front of that car, quite a lot of it, slewing off into the gravel trap. And yes, Comathius has come into the pit, so both the Umbra cars would appear to have been eliminated from that instant, and it certainly seemed to be the case that there could have been suspension damage to the front left of the Ferrari. Frustrating for them. Slightly better for 2 of the other Ferrari squads, because it is the Vallorba Course Ferrari team leading AF Course. At the moment, at the very head of the field, still the battle continues for 7th and 3rd in the GTS class between Renke van der Zande and Jan Magnussen, but Magnussen gets the run on the Mercedes as they accelerate through Aintree, as more problems for Luis Razzia in the Bitec Racing McLaren, who emerges from the pits, but evidently without much in the way of forward propulsion. So he is unlikely to be going much further. It's van der Zande and Magnussen now really being chased down by Alexander Taukenitzer Jr. Taukenitzer Jr., who was such a star of the Winter Series that we had through February and March. He's just not quite, though, at the pace this year, although they have been on the podium a couple of times, most notably at Paul Ricard in the wet-dry race, where they did stand, actually, a reasonable chance of claiming victory. Thus far this weekend, it's been a fairly frustrating visit to Silverstone for the Taukenitzers. Certainly Alexander Taukenitzer Jr. will be frustrated to be bottled up behind this battle between Renke van der Zande and Jan Magnussen, because although they're not slowing themselves down too much, it's enough to thwart Taukenitzer Jr. It's the opportunity as well for those ahead to drive away, as there is Razzia ailing along the hangar straight as Bert Longin has now raced himself onto the tail of Peter Cox in the Lamborghini. And we'd expect to see that, because generally speaking, the Super GT cars should be about a second lap quicker than the GTS machinery, particularly on a track like the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. Then through the corners, it's often the case the GTS cars have the edge, because the Super GTs, like the Corvette of Bert Longin, do not have ABS brakes at their disposal, whereas the Super GTs do. And certainly for the heavy braking zones, that can sway the advantage their way. Well, headlights ablaze from Bert Longin. They are racing for overall position, 5th in the race, and therefore Peter Cox has got no compulsion to move out of the way. He certainly won't be getting blue flags telling him to move out of the way, so it means that Bert Longin is going to make a manoeuvre. He's going to have to do it on the track. Thinks about maybe a little bit of a lunge to the inside of the loop. Realises that that's probably unlikely to end successfully. So instead is having to content himself with following Peter Cox down the Wellington Straight. Likewise, Jan Magnussen on the tail of Renke van der Zande. They run in close formation as headlights ablaze. 8 laps completed by Luca Filippi, with Matt Griffin still just 1.5 seconds adrift, and then Nicky Pastrelli a further 1.5 seconds back from there. Duncan Cameron, Matt Griffin's co-driver, an interested spectator on the pit wall. At the moment, Matt is doing exactly what Duncan would have asked him to, because he's staying with Filippi and Pastorelli. But they will be mindful that they don't have that pit stop penalty, as again Longin looks to the inside at Cox corner to make the manoeuvre on Peter Cox. Cox swoops through, claims the racing line, so no way through on that occasion for Longin. Instead, he'll look to get the good run through the Maggots and Beckett's complex, which they midway through this moment in time, and then down the Hanger Straight, where he could possibly make an overtaking move. The same goes for Alexander Stalknitzer Jr., who's now really showing considerable interest in letting himself up past Jan Magnussen. And that would give him 8th position, so the 5 cars pound down the longest straight here at Silverstone. And diving into Stowe Corner, and Bert Longin makes the move on Peter Cox. He's able to just let the straight line speed advantage of the Corvette tell on the Hanger Straight. Takes the place away from Cox and sets about trying to pull away from the Lamborghini. And Cox is about drinking back to the inside. Alexander Stalknitzer Jr., though, unsuccessful in his attempt to pass Jan Magnussen. Already, we're only just a couple of moments away from the pit window opening. It will open when the clock ticks down to 30 minutes in the race remaining, so it won't be on this lap, but at the end of the next lap, these drivers, if they so wish, will all dive into the pits to make their mandatory pit stop. In many of these instances, it's the slightly quicker driver who's at the wheel at the moment, so we could well see them remaining out on track until a little bit deeper into the race. Right, our timing screen is telling us that the team manager of car 3, Luca Filippi, that's the Valorba Course Ferrari, has been summoned to race control, and that could well be a follow-up to the track limits issue that we picked up earlier on with Filippi. So Luca Filippi and Andrea Montermini could be facing some sort of sanction in the Valorba Ferrari, as Luis Razzia, having made a very, very slow lap of the Silverstone circuit, once more back into the Bitech pit, from which I suspect he may well not emerge. 9th lap of the race, reeled off by the race leaders. Magnussen and Van der Zande still doing battle, still no switch in that order. Both the cars, though, looking immaculate and also appear to be very well balanced to the driver's liking. Whilst out at Jerez, Renger Van der Zande and Miguel Toril took really a very famous victory in the Mercedes SLS, taking advantage of not having pit stop handicaps and then doing a superb job in holding off the Super GT cars, chasing them down latter stages of the race. Now Magnussen, Johnny Larson, likewise, a very competitive proposition, the pair of them, and in particular, when the weather's taken a turn for the inclement, the Kessel Ferrari has been rapidly climbing up the order. New paint scheme this weekend for them as well. The black, white and red, though, looks utterly immaculate. Alexander Stalknitzer Jr. is getting ample opportunity to admire the paint job on the rear of the Kessel Ferrari, because he still remains behind him and still not quite able to get on turns with his. Van der Zande fights the wheel through the second phase of Vale, and that could be Magnussen's opportunity. That was a slight mistake from Van der Zande, and Jan Magnussen now underneath the rear wing of the Dutch driver in the Mercedes, and Van der Zande knows that he just moved across a car's width or so towards the middle of the road just to make sure that Magnussen couldn't quite draw alongside. As the driver change is now open and on as we come to the end of the 10th lap of the race. It's Luca Filippi who leads the way. He set the fastest lap of the race. On the 5th lap, still got there, of course, Ferrari of Matt Griffin chasing him down. Griffin, who was 4th in last year's British GT Championship, alongside Duncan Cameron, with 1 victory to their name. And then Nicky Pastorelli, former European Formula 3000 champion, former champ car racer, en route to very, very successful career in GTs on his tail. And these 3 drive very, very top of their game, as Pastorelli just maybe uses a bit more curb through Beckett than he would have liked to. You can rest assured that they are pushing these cars to the absolute limit. They accelerate down the Hanger Straight once more as Bert Longin comes into the pits, and he will hand over to former Dutch supercar champion Diederik Schittoff. So Longin out, removes the seat insert, as you can see. Schittoff's probably got about a foot or so over Bert Longin in terms of height. Gets plugged in terms of the radio. Also in is Rafael Suzuki's hand over to Giorgio Pantano. No surprise that either, because Suzuki actually did no laps in testing or free practice due to an accident and then an engine failure. So he learnt the track in qualifying yesterday, and slightly frustrating stint for him Also in is Matteo Bretta's handover to Michael Lyons, this being Lyons' home race. And Michael, who is a member of the British Racing Drivers Club, the BRDC, with the proprietors of the Silverstone circuit, very, very keen to put together a strong home performance. He did so yesterday, and he's going to have the best part of 30 minutes as well today to race up the order. There's good tactical thinking from both the Bitech team and indeed, of course, with the Ferrari to bring their drivers in now, because they're in that train of cars, maybe being just slowed a little bit, and therefore coming into the pits nice and early. They'll be aiming to feed out into some clear air and possibly jump one or two cars on the strength of a couple of good outlaps. Luca Filippi, is he going to duck in this time around? No, he's not. We can also expect Matt Griffin and Nicky Pastorelli to go fairly deep into this pit window, because Griffin is a little bit quicker than Duncan Cameron, and likewise Nicky Pastorelli faster than his co-driver in the Vodafone Corvette, Miguel Ramos. Andrea Montermini watching the television coverage in the Vallorba course pit, just waiting to see when they choose to bring in Luca Filippi. The fact that he's got his helmet on, hands device at the ready as well, suggests we could be seeing Filippi into the pits at the end of this lap, which will take us pretty much halfway in the race. So there is the of course Ferraris, which is now in the hands of Michael Lyons, and then that car has come out clear of Giorgio Pantano in the Bitech Racing McLaren. Out of Stowe into the Vale and Club complex come the leading trio of cars. Then we've got the slightly out of sequence McLaren in the hands of Giorgio Pantano, which is essentially a lap down, but that's slightly artificial because, of course, the cars ahead of him have all got to come in and make their mandatory pit stops. So through Abbey and then Farm, leading trio, Luca Filippi, Matt Griffin, Nicky Pastorelli, and the gap has just widened out ever so slightly over the last couple of laps. For probably the first 8 or 9 laps of the race or so, they're all separated by 3 seconds. That's now widened to the best part of 5 seconds as we see a change for the LNT Ginetta. Lawrence Tomlinson is in, hand over to Mike Simpson. Mike Simpson, probably a little bit quicker than Lawrence Tomlinson, was right up in the fight for GTS podium contention in the first half of yesterday's race, so he going to have, though, a fair amount of work to do in the second half of today's race, and we are almost half race distance. 25 minutes and change left on the clock here at Silverstone. This is the first ever visit of the International GT Open to Silverstone. It's proved a very popular move with the teams and competitors, also a very popular move with the spectators, because there have been very busy car parks on both days of this International GT Open meeting. The opportunity to see such a fine and huge field of GT cars proving irresistible. As Pastorelli comes in to hand over to Miguel Ramos at exactly half race distance. They are the first of the leading cars to blink and make the switch. Jerome Bleekemolen still leading the GTS class. He's not coming, nor has Peter Cox. Ranke van Zander, Jan Magnussen, Alexander Tauknitzer Jr. And Tauknitzer Jr. now has got the run on the Kessel Ferrari of Magnussen. There's problems for Mike Simpson as he tries to get underway. Ginetta G55, the door won't shut. Tauknitzer Jr. couldn't quite make the manoeuvre on Magnussen, and they're about to encounter Freddie Kramer, who emerges from the pits in the sister Kessel Ferrari to that of Jan Magnussen. Kramer, who's been on the podium previously in the GTS class in the GT Open, was about to be passed there by Magnussen as we see Roman Mavlanov taking over from Paul Rosell in the pits. And yes, Kramer was successfully passed by Magnussen and also Tauknitzer Jr. as well. It's a very, very tough place to lap a car through. Beckett, not really the space. Tauknitzer Jr. now goes to the move on Jan Magnussen and goes through. He takes advantage of Magnussen being slowed through Beckett's and Chapel Curve. And that's the opportunity that Tauknitzer Jr. needed to climb back into contention, 7th place. Then he now moves, although both of them yet to make their pit stops. They're going to have to do so either at the end of this lap or the one after the pit window closes, when there is 20 minutes of the race remaining. Pair of them accelerate past the Formula 1 pit complex, the wing complex, into Abbey Curve, and then around Farm. Those two corners incredibly rapid before they hit the heavy braking zone for Village. That will then fire them around the loop and back down the Wellington straight. Now that Talkenitzer Jr. is clear, and Magnussen, what can he do about chasing down Renger van der Zande? Van der Zande, in turn, is beginning to engage Peter Cox in battle for second in the GTS class. And they are chasing down Marco Seefried in the Rinaldi Porsche, who has already taken over from Vadim Kogai at the wheel of that car. So the fight then for 5th and 6th position between Peter Cox and Renger van der Zande. It's for second in the GTS class standings. And they're decided that they're going to have another lap of this battle because they've got enough time to do a full lap of the circuit before the clock ticks to 20 minutes remaining. So they will make their pit stop, like so many of these front runners, at the very back end of the pit window, because none of the 4 cars that we've really been following on this lap, include Alexander Talkenitzer Jr. and Jan Magnussen, taking the opportunity to duck into the pits either. So through Kopp's corner and on to Maggots and then into Beckett's. Van der Zande taking a big bite out of the very low-lying curbs here at Beckett's. The drivers saying that you really can attack them. And out to Chapel Curve, Michele Rugolo passes over the keys of his Ferrari 458 to Claudio Tadanovic. That brings that car out of 9th position as the Mercedes SLS closes inexorably onto the tail of the Lamborghini in the hands of Peter Cox. Through Stowe Corner, the pair of them come. So we see a change a little bit lower down the order. That is into pit lane, Danny Wertmann's handover to Jackie Camp in the 3rd of the Corvettes. Through Club then comes the fight for second in GTS standings, and Van der Zande now just really being caught up behind Peter Cox, the pair of them running out onto the AstroTurf on the exit of Club Corner, sprinting along the Grand Prix pit straight and into Abbey, where, as we saw earlier on with Joel Comathius and Stefano Constantini, you can't really overtake there. So they have to content themselves running through single file into the braking zone for Village, where you can overtake if you're close enough. On that occasion, Renger van der Zande wasn't quite onto the tail of Cox, and head around the loop as the race leaders come in. So into the pits is Luca Filippi to hand over to Andrea Montermini. Likewise, Matt Griffin peels in to hand over to Duncan Cameron. Now remember here, Montermini and Filippi have to spend 45 seconds more in the pits than Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin. And so that should put the AF Corse Ferrari once more in the hands of Duncan Cameron, out of the pits and into the lead of the race. Also in is GTS class leader Jerome Bleekemolen to hand over the Autolando Sport Porsche to Emilio De Guida. And will this then be the 3rd victory of the season for Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin, because they've always gone very well on the Sunday morning races where they've been able to take advantage of the not having a pit stop handicap from the Saturday race. They were victorious in the 2nd of the races at Portimao, likewise in the 2nd of the races at the Nürburgring. They didn't get to race at Jerez after Duncan Cameron had a disagreement with a barrier in qualifying on the Saturday. So a home victory for Cameron and Griffin would be something that they would be very, very keen to achieve. The car they've got to watch for, though, is Diederik Schittoff. Here he is, number 7, who took over from Bert Longin right at the start of the pit interchange window. Had an additional 10 seconds to spend in the pits, but Schittoff arguably a little bit quicker than Duncan Cameron, who emerges from the pits now. So essentially, Duncan Cameron takes over the de facto race lead because all the cars have made their pit stops. The pit window has now closed. And we will see at the end of this lap the exact order. The order of the race at the moment is a little bit in flux, but it's certainly, going by the pit handicaps, should be Duncan Cameron, who has come out in the lead of the race. Headlights ablaze on the AF Corse Ferrari as he pounds down Hanger Straight, arrives into Stowe Corner. Cameron, who made his fortune and his business success from one of the price comparison websites, which is very, very popular in the UK. And that's enabled him to engage in his passion of motorsport, and he's really learnt and developed under the tutelage of Matt Griffin. Maybe a problem there for Miguel Ramos at the wheel of the Corvette. In fact, it is, because that's his 2nd pit stop, isn't it, for Miguel Ramos? So he's back into the pits, and that is a real shame for Ramos. Disaster for him as Andrea Montermini gets back up to speed, and he's on the tail of Alexander Talkenitzer Senior, and then it's Fabian Hambrecht and Miguel Toril. So it's Hambrecht in the Lamborghini, he's taken over from Peter Cox. Miguel Toril in the Mercedes SLS, he has taken over from Renger van der Zande. Then Alexander Talkenitzer Senior in the AT Racing Ferrari, and Andrea Montermini trying to pick his way through all of this But with Miguel Ramos frustrating the pits in the Corvette, this could be very, very significant in terms of the championship for Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi. They lost a little bit of their advantage to Ramos and Pastorelli with yesterday's victory. They could well gain it back today. In terms of the championship, Andrea Montermini, by the way, leads the standings single-handedly because Luca Filippi was unable to compete in the second of the races at Portimao due to a clashing commitment. So it's Montermini who leads the standings from Filippi, and then Pastorelli and Ramos. But they were being closed in on in terms of the standings by Cameron and Griffin, who may well jump them in victorious day as Toril and Tao Kanitsa Senior run very, very wide through Aintree Corner. Andrea Montermini able to clear both of those cars through some lovely manoeuvres. And Andrea Montermini, this is actually his first time racing here on this configuration of the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit this weekend, although he knows the place very, very well from his former 3000 Formula 1 and International GT days, but this is first time on the current Grand Prix circuit. So we have another look at Toril and Tao Kanitsa's moment. In particular, Miguel Toril out incredibly wide. So with 15 laps completed, this is the order then. Duncan Cameron leads by 30 seconds from Emilio de Guida in the Autolando Sport Porsche, who's in second place. There is de Guida. So this is the fight for third between Fabian Hambrecht and Andrea Montermini, with Miguel Toril in that Mercedes in fifth, and Alexander Tao Kanitsa Jr., Alexander Tao Kanitsa Senior rather, in sixth position. In terms of the classes then, it's Duncan Cameron, who is being chased by Kenneth Heyer at the moment. Heyer essentially a lap down, but trying to get himself onto the lead lap of the race, who leads the way. He leads the Super GT class. Second in the Super GT class is Andrea Montermini, who's currently fourth in the race, and third here are the Tao Kanitsas, with Alexander Tao Kanitsa Senior currently at the wheel, as Miguel Ramos continues to sit forlornly in the pits. And Cameron really doesn't want to get caught up here with Kenneth Heyer. Heyer, who we see a couple of times a year in the International GT Open, very quick driver with considerable success in the likes of the VLN Championship in Germany, and he evidently feels that he's somewhat quicker here than Cameron, and Cameron doesn't want to get himself too entangled. His advantage over Andrea Montermini is very, very substantial. It's the best part of 40 seconds, 37.6 seconds at the end of the last lap, so he needs to be 4 or 5 seconds a lap slower than Montermini in the remaining 16 minutes to have the lead whipped away from him. All the same, it's something for the, of course, teams consider as Heyer continues to flash Cameron. I think Duncan Cameron needs reminding that Kenneth Heyer is there. So over the line goes Cameron. His lap time on that occasion, his first flying lap essentially, was a 2 minutes 7.7. Through Beckett's they go, and Cameron can take things pretty steadily. He doesn't need to drive it anywhere near 100% in terms of pace here, because of the lead that he's got. In second place across the line, it's come Emilio de Guida, and he's now been caught by Andrea Montermini. So off camera, Montermini's passed Fabian Hambrecht to move up to third in the race overall, and he's going to go second probably by the time they arrive into Beckett's. He looks to jink out of the slipstream, dives to the inside of Emilio de Guida at Maggots, and moves into second position. And if things stay as they are, this is going to be Andrea Montermini's 10th podium in 10 races in the 2013 season. Well, this could be a little bit of a grandstand finish here, because on that last lap, when Montermini was slowed, passing Fabian Hambrecht and behind Emilio de Guida, he was 4 seconds quicker than Duncan Cameron. His deficit is 33 seconds. But already, just in the first 40 seconds lap, Montermini was a second quicker than Cameron. So Montermini in the Lorbacos Ferrari 458 doing everything he can. We take another look at the pass for second position. Emilio de Guida slips to third. He still leads the GTS class, by the way, from the Lamborghini of Fabian Hambrecht, and then the safe path Mercedes of Miguel Toril, who is still busy engaging, or was busy engaging in battle with Alexander Tao Kanitsa Senior, who may well be shuffled off the Super GT podium, because Diederik Schüthoff, you saw at the back of your shot there, looming very, very large on his tail. So we've got 3 leads in the GTS class, all covered by just 4 seconds at the moment. This is closing up very, very nicely with 14 minutes remaining. And I think you'd say that Fabian Hambrecht and Miguel Toril are arguably a little bit quicker than Emilio de Guida, and that probably of the 3, it is Miguel Toril who is the fastest. So that could get very insane, particularly as Tao Kanitsa Senior and Diederik Schüthoff loom ever larger on their tail. coming through to complete the 17th lap of the race, which has already been completed by Duncan Cameron. He's upped his pace. He's done a 2 minutes 8.0. Duncan Cameron, the race leader in the AF Course Ferrari. Montermini does a 2 minutes 3.6. He brings the gap down to 29.1 seconds. And Montermini, if he continues at this rate of capture, could yet take the win of the race away from Duncan Cameron, as we focus, and rightly so, on the battle for third in the race overall and for the GTS class lead. Fabian Hambrecht, somewhat superfluously, flashing his headlights at Emilio de Guida. Well, de Guida doesn't need to move out of the way here. They're racing for the class lead, and they all close up on each other through Beckett's. The run out of Chapel Curve here is going to be absolutely crucial. And Miguel Toril, well, we saw him pass 2 cars in one go en route to his victory at Jerez, and he's looking to do the same here to Fabian Hambrecht and Emilio de Guida. Hambrecht covers the inside of the road, but it's too little too late, because through into 4th position, second in the GTS class, goes the safe path Mercedes in the hands of Miguel Toril. His next target then is Emilio de Guida in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche, although Fabian Hambrecht looking to still go wheel to wheel with Toril. I think they'd be advised to sort themselves out in due course. For now, the task of getting onto the overall race rostrum and past Emilio de Guida. But this stout drive from de Guida, he maybe struggled a little bit for pace at Jerez. He's certainly having no such problems here at Silverstone today, as again Toril flashing his headlights. The problem that Miguel Toril is going to have here is the inherent mechanical grip of the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche gives de Guida the traction through these slower corners, which are so crucial either for an out-braking manoeuvre or, equally importantly, the run onto the straights. As at the back of your shot, you can see that Diedrich Schitthoff has now moved clear of Alexander Taukanitsa Senior, up into 6th in the race overall and 3rd in the Super GT class. Renke van der Zande watches on nervously from the pit wall as his co-driver Miguel Toril goes to the move and takes 3rd place away from Emilio de Guida and climbs into the lead of the GTS class. De Guida now having to withstand the pressure coming from Fabian Hambrecht as well. The 4th place car, by the way, in the GTS class is Roman Mavlanov. It's about 4 seconds back from this battle. So that's going to be something they need to be mindful of. Here we have another look at it. Classic Silverstone manoeuvre, getting the momentum along the Wellington Straight on the brakes into Brooklands. Celebration time for the Safe Path squad. In terms of the battle at the front of the field, well, Duncan Cameron had a much better lap last time around. He was still 2 seconds slower than Andrea Montermini. The gap remains just over 25 seconds, which with 10 minutes remaining feels like it's going to be a little bit too much to ask of Andrea Montermini, although we are becoming increasingly accustomed to these storming drives of Montermini's. More often than not, they net him a super result, as now Diedrich Schitthoff takes his opportunity to try and carve up through the field. And Schitthoff here racing for 3rd place in the race overall. He climbs up to 5th to motor the Lamborghini of Fabian Hambrecht, who looks to the outside with good reason, because Schitthoff catches de Guida midway through Stoke and gets boxed in, loses the place to Hambrecht, who tries around the outside line. They then hit the brakes into Vale, and Hambrecht's got the advantage of ABS braking, so he is able to see off for the moment the challenger Diedrich Schitthoff. All the while they're bottled up behind Emilio de Guida. Cannot afford to slow himself down too much here, because Roman Mavlanov will be looming ever larger on his tail. Again, Fabian Hambrecht using the flashing headlights trick on Emilio de Guida, who will, I'm sure, have Jerome Bleekemolen on the radio to him saying, just stick to your racing line. And it's very hard for the guys to get through, but he leaves a gap to the inside at Village, loses 2nd position in the GTS class, Fabian Hambrecht, for 1 corner. Hambrecht then goes out wide into the loop. De Guida repasses him, and he's also passed as well by Diedrich Schitthoff, who then looks to the inside at Aintree as they accelerate onto the Wellington Straight. The Corvette runs out wide, the Lamborghini runs out extremely wide, and still Emilio de Guida remains in 4th position and 2nd in the GTS class. Super driving this from Emilio de Guida. And he and the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche seem to be absolutely ideally hooked up here, as have another look at the antics into Stowe. Schitthoff was through, catches the Porsche midway through Stowe corner, gets boxed in. Fabian Hambrecht says, thank you very much. I'll go right around the outside. Then into Village, Hambrecht dove to the inside of Emilio de Guida, gained the place, which he was able to enjoy for the best part of 7 metres before immediately back through went Emilio de Guida and Diedrich Schitthoff. And still, de Guida, withstanding the pressure of from Diedrich Schittoff, and this is frustrating for the Dutchman because if he can get past Tegida, he stands the possibility of getting onto terms with Miguel Toril as well. A bit of a wobble through the exit of Beckett, but this is now where the Corvette can really unwind and propel itself down the Hangar Straight. He's got a fair amount of ground, though, to make up as Diedrich Schittoff, and he's not going to be close enough to challenge Emilio Tegida into Stowe Corner, and this is, from Tegida's perspective, his best drive of the season by quite some margin. He really is going superbly well here, withstanding considerable pressure. Again, into Vale, the Orlando Sport Porsche braked very late. In fact, too late. That's the first mistake Tegida's made. And Schittoff goes around the outside at Club Corner, takes the position away from Emilio Tegida. And Tegida now at real risk of possibly losing out to Fabian Hambrecht as well. They are still battling over second in the GTS class, but look at Roman Mavlanov, the blue Ferrari at the back of your shot. He is closing very, very rapidly, as is Lorenzo Bontempelli, so we could have a fantastic four-way scrap here for the final two places on the GTS podium. Again, Tegida making Hambrecht do it the hard way. Into Village they go, side by side, no way through Fabian Hambrecht as Tegida spins up the rear tyres on the Auto Orlando Porsche. They head around the loop and into Aintree Corner, still elbow to elbow, and now Fabian Hambrecht gains the position, moves into 5th place and 2nd in the GTS class, although Tegida has now got Roman Mavlanov and Lorenzo Bontempelli closing on his tail at a rate of knots. The race leaders have flashed across the line out of our sight of the TV shot as well. Only 20 laps of the race, so we have another look at the mistake from Emilio Tegida. It gave Schittoff the opportunity to pounce, and then coming through the loop, Fabian Hambrecht just able to get the exit a little bit more cleanly than Tegida to gain the position. So the gap from 1st to 2nd in the race, by the way, is down now to under 20 seconds. It's 19.9 seconds again. Andrea Montermini was 3 seconds quicker than Duncan Cameron last time round, as Roman Mavlanov draws alongside and passes Emilio Tegida, and that puts Mavlanov and Paul Rosell in the SMP Russian Bears Ferrari up to 3rd position in the GTS class. And that is good enough for 6th position in the race overall as well. And we've got Lorenzo Bontempelli, who is probably the fastest of that trio as well at the moment, closing in. Yes, Bontempelli is about half a second lap quicker than Mavlanov and was 4 seconds quicker than Emilio Tegida last time through. So despite that very fine defensive drive from Emilio Tegida, he is being overhauled all the while. Meanwhile, the race leader, Duncan Cameron, is having his race lead absolutely whittled away by Andrea Montermini, but it's not going to be of particular concern, this, to Duncan Cameron, because although Montermini is 3 or so seconds a lap quicker than Cameron with just 6 minutes remaining, barring a disaster for Duncan Cameron, it's going to be a little bit too much to ask from Montermini. There you can see the rate at which he's been closing in on Duncan Cameron. In 3rd place, we've got Miguel Toril, but Toril is being caught by Diedrich Schittoff, not by an awful lot. Also around the Dutchman was 10th second quicker, as now Lorenzo Bontempelli takes his turn to challenge Emilio Tegida, and he's going to draw alongside, coming into Aintree, and up into 4th in the GTS class goes Bontempelli. That's 7th in the race overall. Bontempelli trying to close in on Roman Mavlanov, although Mavlanov, for the time being, has disappeared on up the road, so it may be a little bit too much to ask in the very similar Kingston Racing prepared Ferrari with Lorenzo Bontempelli to chase down Roman Mavlanov. All the while they're being caught by Giorgio Pantano. We've not seen much of Pantano, but the winner of the GTS class in yesterday's race, the former Formula 1 racer, is about to pass Emilio Tegida. Now, the one thing you can rely on from Giorgio Pantano is spectacular driving, and that's certainly what he's thinking about doing as they head through Copse Corner and then sprint over the slight crest in the road on towards Magnussen Beckett's complex. And could Giorgio Pantano bring himself and Rafael Suzuki back to the GTS podium? It's going to be a tall order here for Pantano, because he needs to really close in 4 or so seconds to Roman Mavlanov. There is Mavlanov, who is currently 3rd in the GTS class. Giorgio Pantano about to try and go 5th in the class. Tegida, though, covers the inside line in Stowe. He's going to make Pantano do this the hard way. Pantano then looking to try and find an opening to the inside at Stowe, and none appears. So with 4 minutes remaining in the race, Giorgio Pantano Again, thinking about the move into Vale, but Emilio Gida breaking all the right places at the right time. He makes the mistake, though, and then tries to take the tight line through Club. He can't do it, and that's the opening that the Bitech Racing McLaren needs. And up into 8th position in the race overall goes Giorgio Pantano, as he attempts to close in on Lorenzo Bontempelli, and Bontempelli looking to do much the same to Roman Mavlanov. Let's have another look at it. Gida made the mistake on the brakes into Vale, slithered out wide through Club. Giorgio Pantano said, "Thank you very much, that'll do me nicely," took the position away. Thumbs up from the Bitech Racing gantry. Disappointing day for them, one car into retirement. The other, though, going very strongly there is Luca Filippi. Watching on for the progress of Andrea Monterni as we see the change for 3rd position. So Diedrich Schittoff has passed Miguel Toril. So the V8 Racing Corvette of Diedrich Schittoff and Bert Longin looking well set then for its 2nd trip to the roster of the weekend. That's been a fantastic drive from Schittoff to scythe up through the field. Miguel Toril, though, in 4th position, still leads the GTS class in the Seyfarth Mercedes, and he has got a sufficient buffer over Fabian Hambrecht, although Hambrecht was a fair bit quicker last time around. And we've got a problem for Kenneth Heyer, and it's a puncture. So Kenneth Heyer in the 2nd of the Seyfarth Mercedes has got a front left puncture. He's also got damage to the rear of the car. And Heyer, who was running in 22nd place anyway, is going to be significantly lower down the order than that, as Duncan Cameron heads into Abbey for the penultimate time of asking, because we have got just over 2 minutes left on the race clock. A lap time for Duncan Cameron is 2 minutes and 6 seconds. And so he's just got this lap and then the one after. But as you can see, Andrea Montermini is taking time out of him hand over fist, and Cameron cannot afford to let off the pace here, because Montermini at the checker flag is going to be something like 3 to 4 seconds back from Duncan Cameron if they continue at the sort of pace that they currently are. Cameron coming through to the braking zone for Brooklands, and he turns into there before Andrea Montermini enters the Wellington Straight. So it's certainly extremely unlikely that Andrea Montermini will get onto terms with Duncan Cameron and pass him between now and the end of the race, but he will get close enough just to make Cameron and Griffin realise that but for a couple more laps, it would have been a real fight to hold on for the win. So into the final lap of the race, and potentially en route to his 3rd victory of the season, heads Duncan Cameron in the AF Course Ferrari. Out of Copse Corner he accelerates. Andrea Montermini again was 4 seconds quicker than Cameron last time around, and he brings the gap down to just 8.8 seconds. So Cameron has been perfectly guided there by the AF Course team. He knows the sort of pace that he needs to run at to be able to withstand the challenge from Andrea Montermini. He has done just that, and he heads on to hang a straight for far time. You can see at the back of the shot there the Valour Course Ferrari of Andrea Montermini, still a full chat through Beckett's, because Andrea is the sort of driver who will never stop chasing until the checker flag comes out around Stowe Corner. And Cameron really is taking things very steadily. Miguel Toril, command of the GTS class, and last time around he was fractionally slower than Fabian Hambrecht, but Hambrecht being 3.9 seconds back. So it looks like it's going to be 2 GTS class victories in 3 races for Miguel Toril and Renger van der Zande, and that is very, very good news for them in terms of the GTS Championship standings. Likewise, this potential 3rd win of the season for Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin, coupled with the lowly finish of Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli, is going to do great things for them in both the Super GT and overall championship standing. So around the loop for the final time heads Duncan Cameron. He's just got the Wellington Straight, Brooklands and Luffield ahead of him. So he plants his right foot and sprints over the brow of the road towards the braking zone for Brooklands. He's being caught still by Andrea Montermini. Montermini's going to be within about 4 seconds at the flag, another lap, and we could have been looking at a different result. As it is, Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin are about to claim their 3rd win of the 2013 International GT Open. As Cameron accelerates through Woodcote Corner, the checker flag is ready, it's waiting, and it's a home win for Duncan Cameron here at Silverstone in the International GT Open. He and Matt Griffin victorious. 2nd place, Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi. And Montermini has brought down a gap that after the pit stops was 37 seconds, down to just 3 seconds at the line. He's taken in 10 laps, 34 seconds out of Duncan Cameron's lead. Third place is about to go to Diedrich Schitthoff and Bert Longin. They taking the flag with then the GTS class victory and fourth in the race overall, going to the safe path Mercedes of Miguel Toril and Renke van der Zande, with Fabian Hambrecht and Peter Cox second in the GTS class in the Lamborghini, and Roman Mavlanov and Paul Rosell completing the GTS podium in the SMP Russian Bears Ferrari. But fourth in the GTS class went the way of Giorgio Pantano, who was able to pass Lorenzo Bontempelli on the last lap of the race. And here is that move. Bontempelli, a little bit too defensive, into club, ran out wide, and Giorgio Pantano, the replay of the move that he made on Emilio de Guida, able to dive past Bontempelli and gain the position. Lively and entertaining race that, with action throughout the field, throughout the entirety of the race, and a big thumbs up from Duncan Cameron. He will be very, very pleased with that, because the season really looked to be picking up momentum with the victories they had in Portimao and the Nürburgring. Disastrous trip to southern Spain and the visit to Jerez. And Cameron getting back on course. For Andrea Montermini, well, we're beginning to run out of superlatives to the sort of season that he's having. He's had the 2 wins, but because of the accumulated pit stop handicaps, to have raced himself onto the podium in each and every one of the 10 races that we've had this season is hugely impressive. And again, to get within just a smattering of seconds of Duncan Cameron at the checker flag, I'm sure we'll have him beaming from ear to ear. For Miguel Toril and Van der Zande, well, this is very good news for Miguel Toril in his quest for the GTS Championship, because he's had a variety of co-drivers. He is racking up the points. So here are the final results then, with Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin claiming the victory from Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi, with the first of the Corvettes for Diedrich Schitthoff and Bert Longin once more completing the podium. Fourth place, Miguel Toril and Renke van der Zande in the safe path Mercedes. From second in the class, the Renault's Leiper Lamborghini of Fabian Hambrecht and Peter Cox, and then the SMP Russian Bears Ferrari of Paul Rosell and Roman Mavlanov completing that podium. Giorgio Pantano races his Bitec Racing McLaren, shared with Rafael Suzuki, up to 7th with that last lap move on Lorenzo Bontempelli. Massive disappointment for Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli, a race in which they would have really fancied the opportunity to get onto the rostrum. Unfortunately, sees them finishing 5 laps down and well outside the championship points, which look a little bit like this, with Andrea Montermini still leading the way and building out that buffer once more. Luca Filippi in second position. It's 57 points back to Pastorelli and Ramos, who are being closed in on by Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin, aided enormously by today's victory. Delight for Duncan Cameron. Nothing sweeter than a home victory in an International Motorsports Championship, and that is exactly what Cameron delivered Silverstone today. Andrea Montermini, thumbs up for Andrea. He and Luca Filippi, I'm sure, will be very, very pleased with their day's work. And as ever, always a very celebratory atmosphere in Parc Fermé, the rounds of the International GT Open. And third place for Bert Longin and Diedrich Schitthoff. I'm not sure that they really fancy their chances of a podium today. Super drive from Diedrich Schitthoff to bring the car onto the rostrum, and quite rightly getting the handshake from Jesus Pareja, the principal of the GT Sport organisation and the man really behind the International GT Open. So helmet off, balaclava off, earplugs out for Duncan Cameron. Matt Griffin with his camera-shy daughter, who didn't want to give away for the camera, unlike Matt. So here are the highlights of the race then. And at the start, it was Luca Filippi who took the immediate advantage. Further back, though, the AF Course Ferraris and the SMP Russian Bears Ferrari getting entangled. The early stage of the race saw plenty of frenetic battling, none more so than between the Ombre Racing Ferraris. This contact between Joel Comathius and Stefano Constantini unfortunately led to an early bath for both of them. Scything through the field was Bert Longin, who was able to take advantage of the nice wide open spaces after his relatively lowly grid position. Fine dicing was to be found throughout the field, as once the pit window opened, the pits got very, very busy on the last lap of the pit window. Afterwards, it was Duncan Cameron who emerged in the lead from Emilio Teguida. Teguida rapidly demoted by Andrea Montermini, Miguel Toril, Fabian Hambrecht, and the rest of them, but it gave us some great entertainment as Teguida drove undoubtedly in defence, made it very, very hard for those behind to pick their way past. Eventually, that mistake was sufficient to give Diederik Schüthoff the opportunity to overhaul Teguida, and then a slight mistake on the exit of the loop was the moment that Fabian Hambrecht gained position and second place in the GTS class. However, it was Duncan Cameron who was in perfect control the second half of the race, giving he and Matt Griffin their third victory of the season in the AF Course Ferrari, despite a stunning drive from Andrea Montermini, who took 34 seconds out of Cameron's advantage, but it was not quite enough. Victory in the GTS class away Miguel Toro and Renger van der Zande. So the crowd here, Silverstone, enjoying the summer weather. 30-degree temperature, the heat haze shimmering. And they've been treated to two thoroughly entertaining races for the International GT Open this weekend. International GT Open now about to head on to its summer break. We've still got 3 more rounds to come this season at the legendary Spa, Monza and Barcelona circuits. The first of those will be at Spa in the first weekend of September before we head to Monza in October, and the season finishes at the Circuits Catalunya on the 9th and 10th of November. For now, though, the drivers basking in the sunshine at Silverstone onto the rostrum. So third place Bert Longin and Diederik Schüthoff, second place Luca Filippi and Andrea Montermini, and our race winners Matt Griffin and Duncan Cameron. And the winning team, of course, AF Course. The Italian national anthem in honour of the winning team, AF Course, scoring their third victory of the season. So we move on to the presentation of the trophies. So first of all, the third place trophies for Diederik Schüthoff and Bert Longin. Runners-up trophies once more for Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi. Super weekend for the pair of them, as they really get their stranglehold on the championship. And then our race winners, Matt Griffin and Duncan Cameron. And then the winning team, AF Course, whose representative quite rightly makes good his escape very quickly, because now the serious business of the weekend has been finished. It's time to make merry with the champagne on the rostrum at Silverstone. And Andrea Montermini showing everything he's learnt in 25 years at the very top of his game as an international racing driver, soaking the race winners, then disappearing. Huge round of applause from the mechanics in pit lane. It's one of the real qualities of this championship, is that the whole pit lane arrives at the foot of the rostrum after each and every race to cheer the drivers on the podium. So champagne fight complete. Time to pose for the photos as we take the opportunity to enjoy the super slow motion action from out on the track. Perfect day for motorsport, and these cars have given us a real treat at Silverstone this weekend. Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi in the Valour Course Ferrari, and then today's winner, Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin there, of course, Ferrari. Perfectly managed race between Cameron and Griffin. They knew exactly what they needed to do and did it to perfection. Well, next tonight's podium festivity will be for the GTS class. A round of applause from the Lamborghini mechanics suggests that our runners-up, Fabian Hambrecht and Peter Cox, about to appear on the rostrum. In third place, we've got Roman Mavlanov and Paul Rosell. And then today's GTS class winners, Miguel Toril and Renger van der Zande. Super performance from both of them, as ever. And Seyfarth Motorsport, the winning team with the Mercedes SLS. The German national anthem in honour of the Seyfarth Mercedes team. So once more we get into the presentation of the trophy. So for third place, Roman Mavlanov and Paul Rosell. A pair of them having an increasingly impressive season in the SMP Racing Russian Bears Ferrari. Runners-up, Fabian Hambrecht and Peter Cox. And then our race winners in the GTS class, Miguel Toril and Renger van der Zande, as they hoist the trophies here at Silverstone. It's been a wonderful weekend of racing in the International GT Open, their first ever visit to Silverstone. Very, very much hope that you have enjoyed our coverage. Well, it's now time to take a pause for the summer. So from myself, Ben Evans, we'll say goodbye for now. We'll look forward to seeing you at Spa in September. Okay, thank you.